Welcome to a world-class business education in a single program. Getting an MBA is an expensive choice, and it's getting even more difficult to justify regardless of the state of the economy. Even the most elite business schools often offer outdated assembly line programs that teach you more about PowerPoint presentations and unnecessary financial models than what it takes to run a real business. You can get better results and save hundreds of thousands of dollars by skipping business school altogether and finding a better, more informative alternative. Others have, with great success. Now it's your turn. Josh Kaufman founded PersonalMBA.com as an alternative to the financial drain of business school. His blog and other writings have introduced thousands of budding and veteran entrepreneurs to the most powerful business concepts of all time. Now, he shares the most critical essentials of entrepreneurship, marketing, sales, negotiation, operations, productivity, systems design, and much more in one comprehensive program. The Personal MBA Masterclass, a home study course for mastering the art of business. This program distills the most valuable business lessons out there into simple, memorable mental models that can be applied to real-world challenges. Just some of the things you'll learn from Josh are: the iron law of the market, why every business is limited by the size and quality of the market it attempts to serve, and how to find large, hungry markets, the 12 forms of value. Products and services are only 2 of the 12 ways you can create value for your customers. The pricing uncertainty principle. You'll learn that all prices are malleable. Raising your prices is the best way to dramatically increase profitability. If you know how to support the price you're asking, Josh will show you how. And the 4 methods to increase revenue. There are only 4 ways a business can bring in more money. Do you know what they are? True leaders aren't made by business schools. They make themselves, seeking out the knowledge, skills, and experience they need to succeed. Listen to this program, and you will learn the principles that it takes most business professionals a lifetime of trial and error to master. Whether you're a novice, just dipping your toe into the pool of entrepreneurship for the first time, or a seasoned, battle-tested pro, Josh Kaufman's The Personal MBA Masterclass will give you the time-sensitive strategies to shape a powerful, profitable business that is girded from all economic conditions. In addition, throughout this program, you'll also hear from other experienced entrepreneurs in Josh's intensive Personal MBA Masterclass who have applied the principles Josh teaches to create their own successful businesses. This product is a treasure trove of insights, strategies, and fundamental principles that will ensure your success in business. In today's highly competitive and economy-challenged business world, you don't need to know everything. You just need to know Josh Kaufman. And now, the Nightingale Conan Corporation is very pleased to bring you Josh Kaufman.
If you're listening to this program, chances are you want to make something important happen. Start a new venture, get a promotion, help your current business grow, or create something new in the world. Hi, I'm Josh Kaufman. Congratulations! By committing to listening to this program, you're on your way to understanding how the business world actually works and how you can succeed in it as quickly as possible. If you're an entrepreneur, manager, or creative professional who wants to master the fundamentals of modern business practice, this program is for you. No matter who you are or what you're trying to do, you're about to discover a useful new way of looking at business that will help you spend less time feeling confused and uncertain, and more time doing things that actually make a difference. One of the beautiful things about learning any new subject is the fact that you don't need to know everything. You only need to understand the most important concepts that provide most of the value. The trick is to separate the essential ideas from the rest. One of my favorite quotations comes from Ralph Waldo Emerson. Emerson said, "As to methods, there may be 1,000,000 and then some, but principles are few. The man who grasps principles can successfully select his own methods. The man who tries methods, ignoring principles, is sure to have trouble." The purpose of this course is to introduce you to the most important principles in day-to-day business practice. Master the principles, and you'll be able to successfully select your own methods and tactics. The principles in this program will help you make better decisions no matter what happens in the world around you. The Personal MBA is a set of foundational business concepts you can use to get things done. The purpose of this program is to give you a firm foundation of generally applicable business knowledge. Once you have a solid scaffold of core principles to build from, you'll find it much easier to succeed no matter what you do for a living. Over the past 6 years, I've read thousands of business books, interviewed hundreds of business professionals, worked for a Fortune 500 corporation, started my own businesses, wrote a book that became an international bestseller, and consulted with businesses ranging from one-person operations to multinational corporations with hundreds of thousands of employees and billions of dollars in revenue. Along the way, I've collected, condensed, and refined my findings until arriving at the concepts presented in this program. Understanding these fundamental principles will give you a solid framework of knowledge that you can rely on to make good business decisions. If you invest the time and energy necessary to complete this program, you'll easily be in the top 1% of the human population when it comes to knowing how businesses actually work, how to start a new business, how to improve any existing business, and how to use business-related skills to accomplish your personal goals. Think of this course as a filter. Instead of trying to absorb all of the business information out there, and there's a lot out there, this program will help you learn what matters most as quickly as possible. Don't worry if you're a complete beginner. Unlike many other business programs, this program does not assume you have any business knowledge or experience. Day-to-day business practice is mostly a matter of common sense and simple arithmetic. You'll be able to understand all of these ideas quite easily, even if you don't yet have much experience in the field. If you do have business experience, don't worry. Even if you're a business veteran with decades of experience, you'll learn many new tricks in this program, and you'll revisit important ideas that will help you ensure the fundamentals of your business remain strong. Reviewing these principles regularly, particularly in the middle of an important project, will improve your results and keep your business mind sharp. Together, we'll explore over 200 simple ideas that will help you think about business in an entirely new way. When we're done, you'll have a much more comprehensive and accurate understanding of what businesses actually are and what all successful businesses do. Armed with the business concepts that make the biggest difference, you can focus on making things happen. At the end of each section, I'll give you a few questions for reflection that will help you apply these concepts to your own business. In part 1 of this program, we'll discuss the fundamental principles of business. All businesses, large and small, operate under the same general principles. Learn the principles, and you can improve your results. In part 2 of this program, we'll discuss people, the basics of human psychology. All businesses are created by people for the benefit of other people, your customers. Understanding the human psyche is essential for success in business. In part 3 of this program, we'll discuss systems. All businesses are systems, repeatable processes that produce a desired result. The more you understand about systems, the more effectively you'll be able to create and improve your business. Business is exciting because it's a virtuous cycle. The more you help other people, the more you prosper in turn. I'm excited to introduce you to these ideas, which will help you lead an abundant, fulfilling life while serving others and making the world a better place. Let's begin.
Corporate life is a beast in and of itself. I wanted to start my own business, do something else. Didn't know what it was at the time, but I knew that learning more about what businesses were and how they worked and how to set one up would help that process somehow. So that's how the Personal MBA started. Didn't have time to go back to school. Didn't have the inclination to go back to school. I just wanted to learn this stuff. So the way I did it was walking down to the Cincinnati Public Library and going to pretty much every Barnes & Noble in the greater Cincinnati area. And I just went to the business shelf and I started reading and reading and reading and reading. And years later, I read a lot of excellent books. I read a lot of really crappy books. But between taking the good from what I was reading and actually looking at how the business was operating, you really start to see patterns in how things are developing, what's important, what you start with and what that goes into and what follows after that. And by learning those patterns, it became much easier to actually take a look at a functioning business or take a look at a new product idea and actually figure out what to do first or what to do next. So the personal MBA just became a way of taking all of these really great things that I was learning and just sharing it with everybody else. And lo and behold, there were lots of people in the world who were interested in learning about business and doing it quickly and doing it relatively inexpensively versus going to college to do it. So in the meantime, I am not at Procter & Gamble anymore. I left a couple of years ago. I had some fascinating experiences there, both on the product development side as well as my background in technology led me to develop the global marketing measurement strategy for Procter & Gamble online. So learning how to actually take a real functioning business that is selling a bottle of laundry detergent sitting on a shelf, look at website consumer behavior and actually make a link between the two in terms of the advertising and promotion we were doing online to actual in-store product sales. So yeah, there's a wide variety of experiences in a very short amount of time. Since leaving Procter & Gamble, I have been largely consulting with all sorts of different companies. Some very big companies like Dell, some very small companies like individual entrepreneurs who are setting up shop in their basement trying to figure out what's going on. And what I've learned in the process is that there really is a very small set of things that you absolutely must know about what businesses are and how they work. And it doesn't matter if you are a single individual setting up shop in your basement or one of the largest companies in the world. The fundamentals of business are the fundamentals. And if you know the fundamentals, you can walk into a new situation and maybe not necessarily understand exactly what to do, but you'll have a place to start. You'll have a place to say, okay, I know I have an idea about what's important here. Let me look at that first. And what I learn in the process of looking at that thing will naturally lead me to the next thing I need to know. So that's what we're really here to learn. It's a systematic way to think about every single business, large and small, doesn't matter what it is or what you're trying to do. Now, why study business? Why are we here? What are we trying to do? And most of us are interested in improving ourselves, improving our financial situation, improving our business operations so we get more done and we have more fun in the process. And learning more about what businesses are and how they work is what leads to that particular goal. And we're going to define effective business practice as a process of calm, clear, and systematic thinking. So the very best thing that you can do when you're learning about business is learning how to look at a business situation, whether it's a new business idea that you have, or an idea you have about how to improve the operations of an existing business. The very best end state that we can get to is knowing enough about what businesses are and how they work that you can take a look at that situation and think through the necessary process as clearly and calmly and as systematically as you can. So clearly because you don't want to miss anything. Calmly because the more kind of emotionally wrapped up you are in the analysis of that idea, that kind of presents some problems in and of itself. It's easy to be too excited about an idea that you have and make mistakes. It's also easy to be not excited enough, or on the far opposite end of the scale, scared of an idea or what that would mean or how you would go about doing that. So being calm, thinking through things calmly really helps because it allows you to evaluate the idea for what it is, which may give you some good reasons to be excited or scared, but you know exactly how excited or scared you should be. And then systematically is thinking through the business as a process. So nothing in business is completely isolated. It's always interconnected with other things. And so being able to see how things are interconnected, what's interconnected to what, helps you understand in the business's operations where you should start, what other things you should think about, because leaving off something that's critical will actually doom the entire idea. So the end goal, we're trying to think about business clearly, calmly, and systematically. And that's what we're going to be learning here. The other thing to know about the personal MBA approach to thinking about business is we're going to be learning principles here. We're not going to be learning methods. So a method would be, for example, a spreadsheet that allows you to calculate a weighted cost of capital. That's a very useful technique in a very narrow set of circumstances that are largely a factor of the situation you're in at the time. And learning some of those tactics is indeed useful if you know what it is, you know when it's supposed to be used, and you use it when you're supposed to. But in terms of helping you think about business as a whole, clearly, calmly, and systematically. Those tactics don't help as much as knowing the underlying principles behind them. So what we're discussing is the universal principles about what businesses are, how they work, and how you can make business decisions more clearly, calmly, and systematically. So that's really the organizing idea behind what we're going to be learning here. We're learning universal essential principles first, and by learning those, you'll be able to look at a business situation and say, okay, this is where I need to think about using techniques like this. And you can invent or use whatever methods make sense at the time. The other thing is business decisions on a day-to-day basis are mostly a matter of common sense and simple arithmetic. Business is not rocket science. It never has been. But unfortunately, from a cultural standpoint, particularly the influence business schools have had on business culture, there's this impression that if it's very complex, it's very profound. So if you know how to calculate an internal rate of return, that means you're a real bona fide business person. And that's really not true. The most essential fundamental principles of business are very simple. They're very straightforward. They appear to be common sense. A lot of them are common sense. So the trick is to value the common sense the way it should be valued, because there is something essential, there is something you have to pay attention to make the most of your opportunities, and there are things that you need to pay attention to make sure you don't make mistakes that are preventable. So if some of the things that we talk about sound like common sense or sound obvious, that's actually a good thing. Because the goal of learning this process of thinking is to be able to look at a situation and go through all of the things that you know about how this works, and for these to be the very most obvious things in the world for you. So we will be talking a little bit of math, but the math will be addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. There's nothing complex here. It's just mostly learning the essentials and doing it systematically in the right order. So, in terms of the organization of the masterclass, we're going to talk about these principles in 3 primary parts. So part 1, we're just going to jump straight into what is a business, how does it work, how does it function, what do you need to think about. Whether you're running a solo venture or one of the largest companies in the world, there is a process, there is a method that must be there in order for it to be a business. So we're going to really jump in and break down that process from start to finish. Second, we're going to talk about people. So businesses are created by people for the benefit of other people. If you're not serving customers, you don't have a business. You're a person running a business, you're probably working with other people in the operation of that business. So understanding the fundamentals of human psychology is incredibly important. The more you know about how people work, the better you'll be able to work on the business. And the third part is systems. So businesses are systems, and we're going to define that. A system is a process that produces a result reliably. And so if you think about your business as a system, if you think about your body and yourself as a system, learning some of the fundamental principles of how systems work can help you improve your business. It can also help you improve your life by allowing you to do things more efficiently and to do things in a way that is more fun and sustainable for you. So the first thing we're going to talk about is an idea that I call the 5 parts of every business. And we're going to define what a business is right now. And roughly defined, a business is a repeatable process that does 5 things. Number 1, it creates and delivers something of value. We'll define that in a moment. That value is something that other people want or need. Number 3, at a price they're willing to pay. Number 4, in a way that satisfies the customer's needs and expectations. And number 5, so the business brings in enough profit to make it worthwhile for the owners to continue operation. That's it. Every single business, large or small, has those 5 parts. And the way I think about these 5 parts is, number 1, every business creates something of value. I call that value creation. If you're not creating something that people want or need, you don't have a business. Part 2, that other people want or need, that's marketing. The process of getting someone's attention, making them aware you have something to offer them, and making them interested in learning more. Step 3, at a price they're willing to pay, is the sales process. So if somebody knows that you have something valuable for them, but they don't ultimately pull out their wallet and checkbook or credit card and give you money for what you've got, you still don't have a business. So sales is the process of completing a transaction. I have something you want, you have something I want, we agree to exchange, and we're both better off because of it. Part number 4, in a way that satisfies the customer's needs and expectations, is called value delivery. And value delivery is basically the idea that when somebody gives you their money, they expect to receive whatever it is that you promised them, right? Could be an item, could be a service. There are all sorts of values that are out there, but you actually have to give them what you promised, or you're not running a business, you're running a scam. So part 4 is value delivery, just giving your customers what they promised in a way that makes them happy that they did business with you. And part 5 is finance. So the business brings in enough profit to make it worthwhile for the owners to continue operation. And finance answers 2 fundamental questions that every business has to answer. Number 1, simple arithmetic. Are we bringing in more money than we're spending? If we're not, we're in trouble. And question number 2 is it enough? Is it enough to make all of the time and effort that we're going to operate this process? Are we bringing in enough profit to make it worth it? If it's not enough, we're just going to stop doing it and start doing something else. So it doesn't matter if you're a solo entrepreneur working in your basement. It doesn't matter if you are a Fortune 50 corporation. This process is universal. Value creation goes into marketing, goes into sales, goes into value delivery, goes into finance. And so once you have this process in your mind, it becomes very easy to either take a look at a business you're already working with or for, or a new business idea that you may have, and evaluate it and start to sketch it out along these 5 parts. So one of the questions that people ask me all the time is, I have an idea for a business, I need to write a business plan. How do I do that? And a lot of times when you look at business planning books, they advocate this massive, like 50-page document with all sorts of charts and graphs and all this thing, so you can go to a bank to get all this funding that you may or may not need. Unfortunately, what a lot of the business planning books miss is the core of the business itself, which are these 5 parts. So I'll describe the simplest business plan that you can ever make. Take a single sheet of paper, make 5 headings: value creation, marketing, sales, value delivery, finance. And in as much detail as you can, sketch out how the business would work in each of those 5 areas. How are you going to make something people want? How are you going to get people's attention and make them interested? How are you going to convince them to trust you enough to give you money? How are you going to deliver what you promised to your paying customers? And how are you going to make more money than you spend and enough to make it worthwhile to keep going? That's it. If you can put those 5 things on a piece of paper, congratulations. You have created your very first business plan. And it really isn't any more complicated than that. So, James, I know that one of the things that you have gotten very, very good at over the years is taking a germ of a business idea and walking through this process. Can you share a little bit about how you've done that?
Absolutely. So one of the things that we've worked together on in our coaching sessions is exactly how to do that. So one of the ideas that I've worked with is doing an occasional restaurant, or just something where I could have just supplemental income. And so we were just looking at that. What would that look like? And so in terms of the value creation, it's feeding people wonderful food in terms of that they would want or need, or developing the marketing. I have a list of people who've eaten what I've made before and they're deliriously happy. And so I have a list of people who I'd be able to contact at a price they're willing to pay. So figuring out what does that look like in terms of how much would I be able to charge based on what services I offered. So is it dinner in their home for a romantic date night? So I would go there. Would I bring people to a location and have a lot of people at once? So thinking through what those options would look like and what the dollars associated with that could be. Or even something we talked about pretty recently was, what if we had a famous author come in and have it be an event, or a musician, because I live in Nashville, rather than just the food being the focus, delivering also another form of value. So figuring out that pricing and then making them deliriously happy is the goal. So that's delivering the value, and then the enough profit would be taking my costs, what does that look like, and taking what I would get back from that, and how can I make that work in order to make me deliriously happy. And so We've worked through that one and several others, but the short answer for that one is that based on the amount of time and investment it would take to do that, along with a lot of hoops and administrative stuff to jump through, that's not the right thing for this time. So it's a page in the book of the one-page business plans. That's one page. And then there are probably 5 or 6 more pages in the book around what are opportunities that, given the right set of circumstances, would be a great business.
Yeah. And so you see the process of thinking. It's like, I have an idea for an occasional restaurant. So what would be the value? What would be the marketing? What would be the sales? What would be the value delivery? What would be the finance? And all of those things are variables. You can change any part of that process, but all 5 parts of that process have to be there. Now, that is a classic small entrepreneurial venture, right? So just you, maybe a couple other consultants or contractors that you would hire. Let's go to the other extreme, which is another idea that you've evaluated. So talk about the alternative fuels business.
Yeah, one of the things that has always fascinated me is the idea of how much waste that we have as a society. And so I was trying to think of, well, what business opportunities are available where the inputs are very low cost and the outputs are very high value. And so my mind immediately went to trash. What are the opportunities there? And in terms of plastics specifically, because of the bulk of a lot of the waste in dumps is plastic. And so I did just a little research and found that there are a few companies, one in Japan and one in DC, that are using post-consumer plastic to create fuel. And so I worked with the company in DC to just evaluate what the possibilities were there. So the Japanese model unit was less expensive but couldn't use post-consumer waste. So it had to be something that was left over from the manufacturing process versus post-consumer. The one in DC was $1 million licensing, and then of course the cost of building the unit. So high cost of entry. And in terms of payback, we determined so what the offering would be a fuel that would be something that people want right now, right? Because fuel prices are continuing to grow. And also a lot of communities, especially, I know it's true in Nashville, a lot of communities have requirements for their public groups to have a certain amount of renewable fuels for the like city buses or city cars or state workers. They all had to have a percentage of their units go on renewable fuels. And so exploring that opportunity and that really, are there enough renewable fuels or are there enough renewable fuels that make sense? So clearly there's an opportunity that we could give something that was truly of value and then figuring out what the cost would look like. Could we do it at a price that would make sense and could we generate a sufficient market? And so all of those things kind of fit into the columns. And that one is still in the notebook because right now the entry costs are really high and it's not something that I want to pursue on a time basis. So the requirements in order to launch that would probably be 70, 80 hours a week for a while. And I'm just not willing to do that based on the number 5. Is it profitable enough or worthwhile enough for me to do it?
Right.
That isn't right now, but it's in the box because at some point my time might expand or at some point I could find a partnership where that time component could be compressed or the costs could come down. So any of those variables could change and make that a moment of opportunity that I would want to take advantage of.
Totally. So you see the very same process, the very same things that we're thinking about for 2 very different ideas, right? Solo home venture to a large industrial fuel manufacturing operation. It's the same process. So whenever you're looking at a business, you always start, and we'll come back to this again and again, you always start with the 5 parts of every business because those are the things that you absolutely must understand to understand how the business operates. The 5 parts of every business. Questions for reflection. Think of the business you're working on. What are the 5 core processes? How do the parts of your business fit together? Can you describe or diagram each part in detail? These questions for reflection are also available in the workbook that accompanies this program, so you can reference those there. So what we'll do first is dig really deep into the first part of the process, which is value creation. And in thinking about value creation, one of the things that I always like to start with is business is a really cool area of life because it's the process of making something that's going to help somebody else, something that they value, something that's going to make their life better in a certain way. And doing that in a way that by making that thing or doing that thing,
they're also making your life better in return because they're buying what you have. So value creation, the first part of the process is really sitting down and thinking about, how can I make people's lives better? What do people want? What do people need? What would people like that they don't have yet? And then just looking out into the world for opportunities to actually make that thing that they want or like or need. And the best businesses in the world are the ones that ultimately create the most value for other people, right? They may create some very valuable thing that only a few people buy, but it's worth a ton to those people. Or you may see businesses, for example, Walmart is in the business of providing products, lots of products, tens of thousands of products in every store, providing little amounts of value to lots of people over very long periods of time. So you can do it either way, but the first part of business is the process of creating something valuable for other people.
Now here are your questions for reflection for value creation. What do people want or need? What can you create that satisfies that want or need?
Now, economically valuable skills is the idea that the things that help you do the 5 parts of every business are the things that will actually make your life better in the business world. Do you want to build a business that makes a lot of money? Do you want to move up in your career? Do you want to create something that changes the world? The things that will help you do that are skills that are directly related to the 5 parts of every business, because those are essentially what businesses are. So if you can learn a skill like custom fabrication of a metal part for a satellite, if you can learn how to make something that few other people can make, that's an economically valuable skill. That's part of the value creation process. If you can get someone's attention and make them interested in what you have, that's an economically valuable skill. That's marketing. If you can convince someone to purchase what you have, that's an economically valuable skill. That's sales. If you can make somebody happy in the delivery of what it is that you're doing, that's economically valuable. If you can look at a business, how much is coming in, how much is going out, and figuring out whether or not it's enough, and if not, how to change things, that's finance. That's an economically valuable skill. So from a personal standpoint, both from a personal growth and from a career standpoint, if you want to get better at business, you focus on the economically valuable skills.
Economically valuable skills. Questions for reflection. What skills, talents, or knowledge do you possess that are related to the 5 core business processes? How can you use these skills to benefit others? What skills could you develop to make yourself more valuable as a business professional?
Now, major caveat in the value creation process is what I call the iron law of the market. And a man by the name of Mark Andreessen, who is now a venture capitalist but was very well known for the founding of Netscape, one of the first major internet browsers, phrased this, I think, as best as anyone can. And he said, market matters most. Neither a stellar team nor a fantastic product will redeem a bad market. Markets that don't exist don't care how smart you are. And that last sentence, markets that don't exist don't care how smart you are, is the best formulation of the iron law of the market. You can create something that you think is the coolest thing on the face of the earth, and if not enough people agree with you that it is the coolest thing on the face of the earth, you've got a problem, because you're not ultimately going to have enough people to sell what it is that you're creating. So has anyone ever had the experience of coming up with this really fantastic idea for a business and doing a little bit of research and figuring out that, well, nobody really wants it?
It's funny when you were talking about this, when you were getting into the 5 points before, and the one thing that I was thinking about the business plan, about how many I've read hundreds, I've written at least a dozen for companies that actually came to fruition.
Yep.
But the iron law is very closely tied to that, because if you don't do your research on the market to see if there is in fact a market, no matter how good the idea, there's nothing there. But one, I guess the first that comes to mind, this was not my idea, but someone came up with, it was the first online transactional real estate brokerage.
Okay.
So everything was done online. And ultimately what happened is they got so infatuated with the idea that they were going to put the actual real estate transaction online, and this is 15 plus years ago, never got to go out and do enough market research with real estate brokers and on real estate law.
Oh, goodness. Oops.
Whether or not, in fact, all this could work. Now, today it can work, and in fact, they spent years troubleshooting because the research wasn't done, and then by the time everything got done, the VC got tired of funneling money into it and sold it to Century 21, which became,
right.
everything else. So indeed now you can function 90-95% online.
Sure.
Real estate transaction. And there were just countless things, but personally, the one business that I started that I went out and raised money for, and it was a $3 million initial raise. I couldn't even tell you who gave me this idea, but it was basically the same thought as I had writing 50-page business plans. I decided to write a very concise, I think it was 12-page business plan. That was about 10 pages of that 12 pages was research. I went around the country and I interviewed people who were successful in similar types of business. This was actually a golf business. And I filled the business plan with data and with research that backed up everything I said on basically on the executive summary of the plan. And I took it to a private equity guy, sat down at his desk. Golf, of course, is an easy thing to grasp for
Sure.
most people. And he opened it up. He actually read the whole thing in one sitting. He closed the book. He literally pulled the checkbook out and wrote a check for $750 million. So he became a lead investor of it.
Yeah.
And he said that he goes, "This is a business. You've done your research. I believe in you." And that was it.
Yeah.
And that turned into a public company.
Perfect.
Later on. I mean, that's the only thing that really comes to mind. It backs up everything that's being said right here, and it is very simple. And what James was saying, if you think about what would happen with the economy if just a few more people than do now, think about number 5.
Yes.
What I find as a consultant for a long time is that the common thread through pretty much every client I've ever had is they never really thought about number 5. They never really thought if all the work they were going to put into this was
It's going to be worth it.
Any value proposition for them. There's always a value proposition for the potential market, but what's in it for you? And a lot of people are infatuated and call themselves entrepreneurs. Like that.
Yeah.
I always wondered what would happen with the economy, with GNP and everything else, if, especially restaurants. If there wouldn't be 9 out of 10 failures in restaurants if the people who started them, who loved it like me, done it, been there, done that, lost $1 million doing that, have really thought about the economics of the business and whether or not they could actually make a living.
Yeah. And a lot of times it's just not doing the math, or not doing the math in a clear enough way that it becomes apparent that it's not worth it. So the iron law of the market, the reason I call it the iron law is it is cold, hard, and unforgiving. It will eat your business if it's true that there just aren't enough people that want it. And the market may not want what you have to offer for reasons associated with any of the 5 parts of a business. So it may not be valuable, they may not be interested, they may not trust you enough to buy it, they may not think that you have the ability to deliver, or it may not be valuable because it's not worth it. It's too much effort to get it going. The only way that you can figure out whether you're on the right side of the iron law of the market or not is to get out of your office, go out into the world, and start testing it.
The iron law of the market. Questions for reflection. Again, these questions are in your workbook if you would like to work with them there. Are you sure people actually want what you're creating? How can you discover what people want before committing valuable time, energy, and resources to the venture?
So a lot of what we're going to talk about in the value creation process is it's all well and good to have an idea and to start to do the analysis. You want to get just as much analysis done that you have a clear idea of what it is you're actually looking for, and you know what you need to do to go out into the world and start testing it. But until you actually start making offers to people, you have no idea. And you will never know whether or not people actually want this thing. So the point of the value creation process is to build the smallest possible unit of value as quickly as possible that someone might actually buy. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. So build that valuable thing, have an idea how the business would be structured, and then actually get out of the office, go out into the real world, and test it with real people who have real money to spend. And general rule of thumb for most new business startups, 10 customers. If you can't get 10 paying customers relatively quickly with your first offer, you don't have a business. So that's a nice tangible target that you can shoot for. Come up with something valuable, get it in a good enough form to test it with people, and get 10 paying clients. If you can do that, there's probably more out there. And there are other sources of research you can use to validate that there are more people out there. So actually, my story in moving from P&G was I had started to experiment with coaching, consulting, so working with folks, helping them evaluate their ideas or improve their business operations. And similar circumstance, I had this idea. It's like, well, I could offer consulting. I don't know if the people who are following personal MBA want that or not. So here's what I did. I wrote up a 4-page document about how coaching would work, what we would do, what the process would look like. And I had my website subscribers and I had an email list. And I sent a single email saying, hey, I'm offering consulting now. If you are interested, let me know. We'll get on the phone for half an hour and we'll see if it's right for you. And I knew I was onto something when I had 200 people respond to me saying yes. And I had 200 phone calls, which made me very busy. And it was so funny because most of those phone calls, it was simultaneous market research, but I was also selling a service. And I had more than enough people who actually said, yes, I want to continue. I talked to a ton of people who gave me really good ideas about what would be the very most valuable thing to do in terms of process and how it could help people. And at the end, I had a full docket of clients, and I resigned from my corporate day job. And I resigned after I knew that this thing that I was going to was already going to work. So that's the real lesson of the iron law of the market, is you never know until you test. And what constitutes a good test is developing an offer and actually giving it to people and see if they take you up on it. Now, when we're talking about creating something people want, it really helps to take a step back and kind of ask the broader, more philosophical question of what do people tend to want? So of what we know of human nature, what are some of the categories of things that people tend to want almost all the time and almost all over the world? And there was actually a really fantastic book, in my opinion, one of the best things to come out of Harvard Business School, was a book called Driven. And it was developed by 2 professors, one of whom is now the dean of Harvard Business School. And it was talking about what people tend to want in the context of business. And they developed a very useful theory that they called core human drives. And the idea is there are 4 types of things, or categories of things, that people tend to want almost all the time, regardless of where they are in the world. And the first is the drive to acquire. People love to collect. Yes, they love stuff. They love to collect things, they love to buy things, they love to browse, they love to shop. They love to surround themselves with things that make them feel comfortable, that sustain them in some way. So think of food, water, shelter as kind of the basic level of this. But they also love to collect things that make them feel good. And that drive to acquire is universal. You'll find it all over the world. You'll find it in all sorts of different categories, but that's a basic drive. It's something that humans do all the time. The second is the drive to bond. So humans are not solitary creatures. We are pack creatures. And we love to connect with other people. So much so that solitary confinement is extremely, extremely difficult psychologically for human beings. We have to connect with other people to feel grounded, to feel healthy, to feel sane. And so the drive to bond is universal. The drive to get together all in the same room and talk about these things. The drive to go on Facebook and see what your classmate from school's kid is doing. We need to connect with other people. The drive to learn is rooted in human curiosity. We love to learn things about how the world works. And the more we can understand about how the world works, the more happy we tend to feel. The drive to defend is the desire to protect ourselves, or our loved ones, or our property. Humankind wouldn't have lasted very long if we didn't have the desire to protect ourselves from external threats. And those could be threats from the environment, could be threats from predators, could be threats from other groups of people. But we have a core drive. We automatically think of ways to defend ourselves against bad things happening. And there's a 5th drive that Paul Lawrence and Nitin Noria, the authors of Driven, didn't include, but I feel is important to include, because it's as fundamental as the others, which is the drive to feel. So the desire for emotional experiences, or pleasure or excitement. So think of something like going to a movie. You're not acquiring anything. You're not really bonding. You may bond before or after the movie, but you're not bonding during it because you're watching the movie. You're not really learning anything usually, unless it's a documentary. And you're not really defending anything. The value that you're getting from that experience is the emotional impact of the film. The excitement or the anger or the love, the pleasurable emotions that you experience as you're watching the movie. So the drive to feel. Now, this is all well and good in theory, but how does it work in practice? The interesting thing, and I think the most valuable use of this particular theory, is whenever people feel that one of these core drives isn't being met enough, a market forms around that particular idea. So take, for example, home security systems. When somebody feels like they have things worth defending, valuables, a family, things that can't be replaced easily, whenever they feel that they are not protected enough, that develops a market into a home security system. Whenever people feel like their lives aren't interesting enough, they go skydiving, they go to movies, they go on trips. They feel a need to do something in one of these areas, and so they start looking for ways to go out into the world to get more of that thing that they're looking for. So the interesting part about the 5 core human drives is you can use this as a mental checklist for developing new business ideas. Think about the genesis of websites like Facebook. Well, it started with Friendster, right? Friendster, Facebook, Twitter, MySpace. So what are the drives that are involved in that? Bonding, definitely.
Acquire, they want to acquire friends
What-
with a drive to get their numbers up.
Exactly. Learning how?
See what everybody's
Stalking your friend, okay.
learning about what other people are doing and
Yep,
what people are up to, and
yep,
good, bad, or indifferent. It's the kind of the rubbernecking.
yes.
Thinking some
Could
things
be.
people do just because they want to be the best or
Yes.
achieve, like achievement, it doesn't seem like an acquisition, but it could be.
You can think of acquisition both in material terms as well as material or social terms. So think of something like influence or power or status. That can be a type of acquisition as well.
I'm glad you added the last one. I think that is a big miss, because as you're going through those, I'm thinking about skydiving, scuba diving, BMX racing, like all these things I've always enjoyed. And I'm thinking that wasn't to do any of those things. So evidently I'm a feeler.
There you go. And that's one of the other things too, is going through the Facebook example earlier, where you can see parts of all of these drives in it. The more drives that are layered into a particular experience, the more compelling it is. There's a reason people spend all day on Facebook. It's like the more of these things that a particular activity scratches these particular itches, the more compelling that type of activity is. So if, in going skydiving, you get the benefit of this very intense emotional experience, as well as the acquisition of some status that says, hey, I went skydiving, that makes it even more compelling than it otherwise might be. So the core human drives are very useful both in terms of coming up with ideas of things that people might be interested or might want. So use it as an idea generating checklist. You can also use it as a way to make your particular idea more compelling. Because if you can add more of these elements to it, the idea becomes more compelling. Just like I can guarantee you that the product developers at Facebook and Twitter, they may not be thinking in terms of these particular concepts, but they're thinking along these lines, because all of these things make it easier and more attractive for people to use what they're developing. So as you're communicating the benefits of what it is that you're offering, the more things that you talk about that relay indirectly to things, and this is more of the subtle nuance approach to marketing. You never say, this is going to help you acquire or bond or whatever. There are ways of talking about these things, like spending more quality time with your family, or helping you get more money, or making sure you don't lose everything if your house burns down. There are all sorts of different ways to talk about it, but this plays directly into the marketing process, because the more people can mentally connect what you're offering to doing more of these things, the more they're going to want what you have. Sales and marketing are two totally different things.
Yeah, of the customer, well, they came in for one message and now I'm giving them a different message and I'm trying to understand why they're not buying and talking about price.
Value creation is kind of easy to understand because you're creating something to sell, whatever it might be. The clearest distinction between the marketing and the sales process is marketing is the process of taking an individual out there in the world who has no idea that you even exist and making them a prospect. So someone who knows you exist and is interested in learning more about what it is that you do. So marketing is the process of creating a prospect. Sales is the process of taking that prospect who knows you exist and is interested and encouraging them to trust you enough to actually pull out their wallet, checkbook, or credit card. So the process of turning a prospect into a paying customer. And they're very different things.
Marketing is education, sales is trust.
Exactly. So core human drives, very useful checklist on all parts, but particularly in the brainstorming phase.
Core human drives. Questions for reflection. What core human drives does your offer connect with? How can you potentially connect your offer with other drives?
Now, the 10 ways to evaluate a market. So remember the iron law of the market. If the market doesn't exist, it doesn't matter how smart you are. It helps to have some process, some method to evaluate when you have a new idea to figure out if this is going to be an attractive enough business to move forward with. And part of that has to do with evaluating, is there a market? It also has to do with evaluating, if this thing works, is it going to be a good enough idea that it's going to be worth spending time on? And there are 10 major points, thus the 10 ways to evaluate a market, that you can kind of mentally go through to kind of estimate, just to see, not an exact science, but order of magnitude, how attractive is this idea? And the first one of the 10 ways to evaluate a market is urgency. So how badly do people want this or need this right now? Is this something that if it exists, I am going to buy immediately because I got stung by a bee and I'm allergic, and if I don't have an EpiPen, I'm going to die urgent? Or is this something that I could wait decades and I'll be just as fine? Obviously, the more urgent people want or need what it is that you have to offer, the more attractive that particular market is for you. Second is market size. So how many people would purchase this? If it is billions, that's pretty attractive. If it's 2, it's probably not going to be attractive unless there are other factors, which we'll talk about here in a minute.
Thinking about hurricanes, Home Depot.
Yes.
I love it when there's like 20 hurricanes predicted. So order more plywood.
Yes, urgently. Everybody needs it. Now, on the market size, one of the things that can impact market size is pricing potential. What's the highest price people would be willing to pay? So, for example, a market of 2 people is probably not very attractive unless you are a contractor for the Department of Defense building something like an aircraft carrier, where the price is billions. You don't need very many people to take you up on that offer to make it worth it very quickly. So typically, the higher the price people are willing to pay, the more attractive the market is. If it's a lower price, you have to have more people who want or need it to equal the same opportunity. Now, the fourth is cost of customer acquisition. So how easy is it to acquire a new customer? So if you're selling an aircraft carrier to the Department of Defense, that may be a very high value transaction, but it may also cost a lot, both in terms of time and money and resources and influence, to get to the person who is able to sign the check. The higher the cost of customer acquisition, the less attractive the market is. Also, the cost of value delivery. So how much does it cost to create and deliver the offer? The more it costs, the less attractive. So if you're selling an aircraft carrier, delivering that aircraft carrier takes a lot of money, right? So that would be kind of points against that particular idea unless you have the capabilities already to do it.
Now, are there formulas and tools that you can use to figure out what the cost of the value delivery would be, or is it all heuristic?
It's mostly heuristic, and it's very dependent on what it is you're actually doing. So the best thing that you can do is to understand the process by which you're actually creating and delivering the value, and just kind of mentally checklist, what are all the steps involved? How much is it going to cost me to do these things? And that can get you an order of magnitude of what you're looking at. Now, the sixth way to evaluate a market
is uniqueness of offer. So how unique is what you are offering versus what other people in the market are offering? Are you the only one doing what you're doing? Or are there lots of other people who are doing what you're doing? So this is where we get into the whole idea of a commodity. A commodity is something that is virtually interchangeable. If you're selling steel, steel is steel. And they could get it from thousands of different suppliers. However, if you're doing something like Dan is doing, which is helping nonprofits raise millions of dollars via internet and social marketing, there are very few people in the world who do what Dan does. And so that makes it more attractive. If somebody wants what Dan does, Dan's one of the only people in the world that can do it. The seventh is speed to market. How quickly can you create and sell it? Is this something that's going to take a day or a couple hours or 10 minutes? Is it something that's going to take 10 years? The longer it takes, the less attractive the offer is. Similarly, number 8, upfront investment. How much do you have to invest before having the offer ready? Is it 25 cents? Is it $25 billion? The more you have to invest upfront before you get paid, the less attractive the offer is. So James's example of the alternative fuels business, one of the major sticking points in that particular plan was upfront investment, having to invest a lot of money upfront and spend a lot of time and a lot of energy before you're making money. So the shorter the time that is, the less you have to invest, the more attractive the idea is. Number 9 is upsell potential. So if you already have a prospect, if you're already selling something, do you have other things that you could sell to people at the same time? You already have their attention. Can you sell them something else? When I was working at Procter & Gamble, one of the brands that I worked indirectly on was Gillette. And Gillette, massive, massive brand. They had, at the time I worked there, somewhere around 90% market share in blades and razors for men. So not a whole lot of opportunity to sell to more people. But there was a lot of opportunity if a guy is about to buy a razor or razor blades, probably needs deodorant, probably needs shampoo, probably needs aftershave, probably needs all of these other things that go with the whole idea of taking care of yourself. So that's upsell potential. Are there 0 things that you could sell to somebody at the same time, or are there many other things that you could sell? And number 10 is evergreen potential. So once you create this valuable thing to sell, how much work do you have to continue to put into the process of developing that thing to keep it selling? Is it something that you just develop once and you just sell over and over and over again? If so, that's good. Or is it something that you have to continually invest resources in keeping going? The less work you have to continue to do, the more attractive that tends to be. Now, the way to use this particular checklist is a very quick back-of-the-envelope calculation, which is rate all of these factors on a scale from 0 to 10. And 0 is the worst possible circumstance, and 10 is the absolute best possible circumstance. So you use this relative weighting scale. It's not exact, but go through and see what your idea would come up to. And when you're done, add it all up. If you're below a 50, you probably have a non-starter of an idea. It's just not very attractive. If you're somewhere around 75, now you're cooking. The closer you get to 100, the more attractive that business is. The closer you are to 100, you're probably going to have competitors in that idea too. So you can start planning for that.
The problem with this is you could have founder's bias. How have you, in your experience using this, countered that kind of bias that, oh, my idea for gasoline-powered turtleneck sweaters is going to really take off? I can just, sure, they're expensive and hard to make and the market's small, but I can do it because there's billions of people in the world.
This would be the very next thing that you do to try to evaluate how attractive this is. Yeah. A way to get around founder's bias is to have somebody else do it independently of you. Right. Could be a colleague, could be a friend, could be a coach or a consultant. Right. But yes, you need to have somebody who is not you. You can take the first pass at it to try to get an order of magnitude, but have somebody else who's not you do this as well. And that'll help you calibrate.
Experience might help too.
Yes, exactly.
Over time, right?
Exactly.
Like in his case, like he probably runs through some of these things and goes, yeah, I've seen that work. Ugh, I've been there, done that, lost some money doing that.
Yes.
Even though other people have made it work,
And here are some things you need to think about that you may not have thought about yet.
It plays into the
10%
whole
of that
systematic approach to the business where I want to look at this now. It may just be something I already know all the answers to all of it, but if you can actually work through it and go, that makes sense, that makes sense. Oh, I didn't think of that. Oh, and then there are these upsell.
There's more work to do
Yeah.
if you don't have the answers you need, and then as you work through them.
Well, that was, like, looking at all this, one of the reasons I closed my business was I couldn't grow it big enough to make it worth quitting my day job.
Right.
And figuring that out and evaluating my market and figuring out what the cost of acquiring customers was too high at that point.
Right.
So,
I think the benefit of having lost some, whatever's important to you, either a considerable sum of money in a venture
yeah.
or a position or whatever that is, makes you become a little more realistic when you're looking at these things. Suddenly, you don't see them as blue sky and, oh my gosh, I can conquer the world with this.
Right.
Suddenly you realize, I tried to conquer the world before.
Right.
Didn't go so well.
So what's different this time?
Yeah.
This time I'm gonna get a little closer.
And
As long as you reflect, I mean, a lot of people, from a mentoring point of view, and looking back at my own history, is that if someone doesn't teach early on, or if you're not lucky enough to learn about reflection, no matter what it is, whether it's losing a loved one, whether it's business, whether it's losing money, whether it's losing your dog, it's like, okay, I lost my dog because I fed my dog chocolate ice cream. So stop and reflect on that.
Right.
You might lose your next dog.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a very simplistic version, but I mean, most people don't. It's great that you can sit back, because believe me, and you know, probably all of us have forgotten to look at the 5 points and go through the process.
Yeah.
And as long as now you learn at some point in your life, before you die, that it's important to reflect on these things and be like, what are the things that I did wrong? What did I do right?
Yeah. And you may be going through the checklist and say, oh, I totally forgot about the cost of customer acquisition.
Yeah.
I don't know what that looks like. So that gives you an opportunity to actually go out into the world and figure out what it looks like, which, James, that's what happened to you both on the customer acquisition side as well as the cost of value delivery. It's like, I have no idea what that is. And doing some homework gives you more information that lets you make a more informed decision.
And having a checklist is what's helpful.
Yes.
So being able to not rely on my memory of what I need to know. And also that makes me think of the Buffett principle of he doesn't do anything that isn't a screaming value. So he looks at these 10 items or whatever his list looks like, and if he has to think about it, he doesn't do it. If he has to get out a calculator to figure out if it's the cutting edge, well, it's just, why do it?
That's like Gretzky's, go where the puck's gonna be.
Yeah, exactly.
The simplicity of that kind of approach is, but knowing, having a system to tell you, like Gretzky knew where the puck was gonna be from a being the best ever, looking at, seeing the system, seeing how the ice works, what the teams are likely to do, and being able to almost see ahead, literally, is, I think, the value he brought, and then just put himself in the position of, well, I'm just gonna be here or here, either way, I'm be in a position to win, which is, I think, what Buffett does more oftentimes.
Certainly he does that in terms of big opportunities, but I imagine that there are also opportunities where he's looking for not a big hurdle based on this vast experience, but what is this 1 foot hurdle that I can just step over instead of doing this vault?
Yes.
What is the small step that I can take that's so obvious
Everybody's
overlooking, or that's uniquely available to me because of my set of circumstances? And I think all of us have unique circumstances where there are opportunities that are uniquely suited to us.
I think that's a good way of saying it. I think you were saying it's about, you don't necessarily get this view through business school or even being in business because you're running around chasing the tactics all the time or navigating the politics, right?
Yep.
My corporate experiences taught me to move up. I'd love to do marketing, which is why I'm a marketer.
Yeah.
But in order to move up, I have to become more of a politician than a marketer that actually genuinely finds a product or a service that's actually going to help people and then help deliver that value to those people. So
Right.
that they can go, wow, I love this. So stop spending $1 billion trying to convince people they need something, simplify it, and really just be really good at delivering that value to people and then take some of the extraneous stuff away.
Right.
And wow, look, there's more profit there too.
Amazing how that happens, right? 10 ways to evaluate a market. Questions for reflection. How attractive is the market for your idea? Are there other markets that may be more promising? Can you alter your idea to appeal to a more attractive market? Now,
we were talking about the more attractive overall a business idea is, the more likely other people are going to recognize that there's something here and you're going to have competition. And that leads us to a classic entrepreneurial situation. I'm sure we all had the experience of coming up with this wonderful business idea and you get really excited and you start doing some research. So you go to Google and you type in your idea and you see all sorts of people who are doing exactly what you're thinking about. It's like, oh no. Yeah, it's like somebody else had my idea. And
Because it's your idea.
yeah, it's like my idea.
But you
And
can use what they did and see what they did wrong and see how you can do it better.
exactly. So this is called the hidden benefit of competition. So we've all felt crushed when somebody else had our idea before we had our idea, and they're already in this market. And the entrepreneurial mistake is by assuming that people who are already in the market, there's no opportunity for you to enter to. And the hidden benefit of competition is, think about the iron law of the market. So markets that don't exist don't care how smart you are. If there are people who are already in this market, and if you can figure out that they've been in this market for a while, you're already on that right side of the iron law of the market. People are already doing this thing and they're making enough money to make it worth it to keep doing it. That is the very best news you could ever
Could that
have.
be the case even if the market is a declining or a shrinking market?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Even if a market is declining or shrinking, or even if a particular business is declining or shrinking, a $1.1 billion business that declines 10% in a year is still a billion-dollar business. So when you think of it in terms of financial sufficiency, so is it enough to make it worth your time and effort? Even if it's declining, it may be worth it to get into it. And if you have competitors, that also gives you one of the best market research opportunities you will ever have. Because you can buy what your competitors are doing, and in doing so, reverse engineer their process. Particularly if you know how the 5 parts of every business works, right? So you just become a customer of your competition, make yourself a little checklist. How are they creating value? How are they marketing? What does their sales process look like? What does the delivery process look like? What can I learn about their financials? And that is one of the best ways you can get accurate information about any market. And you can take that opportunity and say, okay, what are they doing really well? What should I also do? What are they doing really poorly? And how can I improve upon that when I do it, potentially? So the hidden benefit of competition is competition in your market is a good thing. It proves that there's money to be made. It also gives you the opportunity to do some very good market research.
The hidden benefit of competition. Questions for reflection. Who does your competition currently serve? What value do they provide? What are your competitors doing well? What are they struggling with? What can you do better than your competition?
The mercenary rule is the idea of it's very easy to get excited about a business when you look at it and you realize that I could make a lot of money doing this. So the mercenary mindset is I'm going to go and do this thing that is going to make me the very most money in the very shortest period of time. And this is something that's attractive for entrepreneurs and business people in general because money is part of the goal. Financial sufficiency is part of the goal. You want to make a lot of money, ideally. But if the money is the only thing that's attracting you to the idea, it's a classic trap because it almost always takes more time and more energy and more investment and more resources than you expect when you get started. So if the only thing that's attracting you to the idea is the money part, it's going to be very, very difficult to roll out of bed every morning and get started on that idea. So building or creating something, particularly a business, is basically a process of just getting started on doing it or improving it over and over and over again. And if the money is the only attractive part, that's not going to be enough. So the mercenary rule is don't be a mercenary. It has to be a big enough opportunity to get excited about it, but there also needs to be something attractive enough about the business, either the idea or the process of the idea, to make it worth it for you to get out of bed every morning and get to work on it. Now, that said, don't necessarily ignore the quote-unquote boring businesses because they're not sexy. So take something, for example, like garbage collection. Not the funnest business idea that there has ever been, right? You're picking up people's trash. However,
that can be a very lucrative business, particularly because everybody needs it, everybody pays for it, it's something that you can scale relatively easily. There's a lot of money to be made there. I can pretty much guarantee that no one in this world is really, really fascinated by picking up garbage. They're just not.
You can see how waste management and those other larger companies have turned it into a helping profession.
Exactly.
And that, like you just said, is remarkable, and it could be really attractive for somebody to, I'm going to help people by uncluttering their lives and changing it from waste into, that's brilliant.
Exactly. So it's finding something fascinating in the end result that you're providing or in the process of doing what you're doing. So for a person who is really fascinated by logistical type processes or resource management type things, so how do I make sure all of my trucks are optimally routed? How do I make sure that we're covering the area in a shorter... I mean, there are lots of really interesting problems in the idea of waste management. And it's perfectly possible to get excited about the process of doing something where you're not even necessarily so excited about the actual doing of the thing that is being done. So there's a balance there. Don't ignore the boring ideas just because on the surface they're not sexy. There's actually quite a bit to get excited about.
I think that goes along with the whole idea of education in general, where a lot of people don't like the idea of going to class every day, spending a bunch of money on their education, but they like the idea of the end result of what they're going to do afterwards with that.
Totally. And that's a generalizable rule too. We'll talk about an idea called mystique, where sometimes people get really into the idea of doing something, but they don't like the process of actually doing the thing, right? Which is a problem in and of itself. The mercenary rule. Questions for reflection. How interested are you in the market you're evaluating? Does your mind keep returning to the market of its own accord, or do you have to push yourself to work on it? How can you make the market more interesting? Now, opposite end of the spectrum is what I call the crusader rule, which is you have an idea about a business, and the heavens open up and a choir of angels start singing and like, this idea is going to change the world and make me a bazillionaire and everybody is going to love me and this is the idea of the century. And you get really, really excited about it. I think we've all been here. The crusader rule is there's a huge difference between an interesting idea and a viable business. And sometimes in our excitement, it's very easy to lose sight of the 5 parts of every business. It's easy to not think of the 10 different ways to evaluate the market. You just get so wrapped up in things that you jump in feet first, or head first, I should say, and you make a lot of commitments and make a lot of decisions that ultimately either don't bear fruit or cause damage to you because you didn't do your homework first. The crusader rule. Questions for reflection. Is your idea really a viable business? Or would it make a better side project? Are you considering everything necessary to ensure your idea is capable of becoming a self-sustaining business? So there's a continuum between being a mercenary and being a crusader. There are good elements to both of those things. And there are bad elements to both of those things. We're trying to go smack dab in the middle. We want to be excited about the idea and the process of doing what we're doing. We want to know that it's promising enough to make it a high probability that it's going to be worth it for us to put in all this work. And we want an idea that has both of those characteristics, but not go too far on either side. Are you all familiar with Dean Kamen, a famous inventor? Had an idea for a form of transportation that was going to revolutionize how cities were built around the world. It ended up being a powered scooter. And that was a good example of getting so wrapped up in the promise of something to do some market evaluation that says people aren't interested in buying a $5,000 alternative to walking or riding a bike that also makes you look particularly goofy while you're on it. So that's a good example of getting so excited about an idea that you fall on the wrong side of the iron law of the market. They were adamant in not doing any sort of consumer testing before. And that's the real lesson here. From a technological standpoint, it's extremely impressive. And it's a great example of you can have a really rock-solid product that breaks all sorts of barriers in what was possible, and it can still be a business failure. Dean Kamen's companies are private.
and I think they spun Segway off. It was sold to another company. The last sales figures that I'm aware of that they released, they sold approximately 10% of what they expected to sell in the first 5 years. So safe to say, with that much expensive machinery and tooling up a production line, they lost a ton of money. And a lot of it was not validating that there actually was a market of paying customers before they launched this thing.
Congratulations! Simply by listening to this first session, you've taken a critical first step toward improving your life, a step others neglect. Hi, I'm Dan Strutzel, Vice President of Publishing from Nightingale Conant. You see, we know that if you get just one great idea from this program, it will be worth many times over the price you pay. Plus, the ideas we share will benefit you for a lifetime. It is as simple as listening, learning, and applying these great ideas and techniques in your life. When you do, you'll see real and significant improvements immediately. It's been said, the path to success is to take massive, determined action. Take action now by continuing on to the next session. For 50 years, we've seen firsthand how our products empower people to be, do, and have more in life. But it only works if you continue to listen, learn, and act. Thank you for listening to this Nightingale Conant audio program. Enjoy the rest of this program.